Hey, folks. Welcome to our Unity 2020 Campfire Early Morning Edition. I have the honor of sitting with Governor Jesse Ventura, who is joining us this morning to talk about the Unity ticket, the state of America, and all sorts of related concepts. Welcome, Governor Ventura.
Thank you. My pleasure. Great to be here. I should announce right away I'm computer illiterate, and I've never owned a cell phone. And I've now made it my life's mission to never own a cell phone. I figure if I live another 15 or 20 years, I can put it on my grave, and I might be the only one that can do it.
You're going to be the last holdout. I respect that, I have to say. Yeah, they are a Faustian bargain at best. So what I'm going to do is I am going to light a couple of candles here as part of our metaphor of campfire while I explain to our new viewers that fires have played a very important role in human history and prehistory. People have gathered around fires in the evening as their eyes are no longer capable of allowing them to do the work of being human out in the wild. And when times are good, people celebrate around fires. When times are not so good, they discuss what's going wrong and what might be done about it. That's why we've used this metaphor. So anyway, I've lit a candle for each of us here, Governor Ventura. And so what we are going to do is have a conversation about the state of the country and what we might be doing about it. So let me say a few other things introducing you. You were a Navy SEAL in Vietnam, is that correct?
Well, actually, in my day, we were two units. We were the underwater demolition teams as well as the Navy SEALs. And when I deployed my first deployment, I was a member of the last underwater demolition team, UDT-12, who deployed to Vietnam as an entire team in February of '71. And then I won't go into detail because a lot of that's classified, but then they broke us down into different type of deployments. But you all go through the same training. I went through SEAL SBI, so you're completely interchangeable. One unit works a little bit more in the water, while the other unit works a little bit more on land.
And am I right that the skills involved in underwater demolition are also useful in renegade politics?
I guess with the art of survival, you could throw that in there, and you never quit. You know, when you go through BUD/S training and basic underwater demolition SEAL training, it's about a half a year long. In comparison, the elite Army airborne training is 3 weeks, and BUD/S training is 26 weeks. And so it's the hardest training known to the United States military. We're probably the only unit that truly has the respect of the United States Marine Corps.
Interesting. Well, I should say there is an interesting concentration of, I believe it would be fair to say, special forces folks in our movement and people favored by our movement. Admiral McRaven, Nate Boyer, Dan Crenshaw, Jocko Willink, all of these names are related to Unity 2020 in one way or another. So you are in a group of elite special forces people associated with recapturing the White House for the American public, which I would imagine is something that we share, a belief that that has to be done if we are to right the ship of state. Go ahead.
I would agree with that. It's, right now, I question our leadership a great deal. That is a tough job. I mean, let's not deny it. Being a head president of the United States is no walk in the park. I was a governor, and being a head of a state is difficult. And I can only imagine when you're the head guy of 50 states, what you have to deal with on a daily basis. But it's something that requires your total concentration. I don't think you should be playing golf on the weekends when you have a pandemic loose in the country and things of that nature. I think that you should be putting in 40 to 60-hour work weeks at a minimum.
Yes, I think it's a job no rational person could want. What one hopes is that somebody who feels the call will take the office out of a sense of duty. And that seems to me a much better model. At the moment, what we seem to have is a system in which people with unbridled ambition seem to end up in this office, and it has not served us well.
Well, I was told, and this was interesting, by an outlaw biker. Are you familiar with one percenters, outlaw bikers?
Why don't you give us a refresher?
A one percenter is the outlaws, the bikers that people fear. And, I was with some a few months ago, and one of them said something very profound to me. He said, "You need to be the next president." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because you're the only one that doesn't want the job."
Yep.
If you think about that for a moment, and this coming from an outlaw biker, that's pretty perceptive of stating you want the person who doesn't want the job but feels obligated because of his patriotism and love and everything, that he will do the job even though he really wouldn't make it his first choice of 4 years of employment.
So how familiar are you with the Unity 2020 proposal?
Not too familiar. I know that they I know that they seem to want to draft someone for president, and apparently, and it was news to me that that's apparently what happened in the case of Dwight Eisenhower, which I had no idea of. And again, it falls back to what we're taught in school, which I think is highly questionable today. The things I'm learning today, I'm now questioning, why wasn't I taught this in school? Why didn't I know anything about this in school? Prime example, that thing in Tulsa, Oklahoma with the black people. Never once in school was I ever taught about that major event where the black people were slaughtered in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That wasn't taught in school when I went there. So, to me, it's a case of, we got to get our history in line and start telling the public the truth. No matter how much it hurts, the truth is what it is.
Yes, and I would imagine that an honorable team at the head of our government would view the repair or the replacement of school with something that properly functioned as a high priority, because, as George Carlin said, the purpose of school is to make you just smart enough to operate the machines. And it turns out, actually, we offshored the machines, so even that's not necessary anymore. It's time to make school function, and you can deduce an awful lot, not from what's taught in school, but what's absent from the curriculum. You're quite right about that.
And unfortunately, we've lost the voice of George Carlin, which we so dire need today. We need George Carlin back. If there's any way to resurrect him and Muhammad Ali, those are the two people that we need to bring back from the dead.
I agree. I miss them both. Bill Hicks as well. There are a number of people whose help we could use at this moment. So let me tell you about Unity 2020's proposal, because it isn't really as simple as electing a president who's feels called by patriotism to do the job. Part of the problem with that, as you know, as an independent politician, you've been both a mayor and a governor. As governor, you were elected in the Reform Party, if my understanding is correct.
No, actually, I was elected from the Independence Party of Minnesota. We then, after I was elected, ultimately aligned with the Reform Party. And then when we realized the Reform Party was not a real third-party movement, it was only the movement of Ross Perot, we then disenfranchised while I was still in office and went back to being the Independence Party of Minnesota. No, in Minnesota, if you get a candidate that gets 5% of the vote in a statewide election, you then qualify as a major party. And we had Dean Barkley ran, and he got over 5% of the Minnesota vote. And so the Independence Party then achieved major party status in the state of Minnesota. And what won the election for me was they allowed me in the debates, because at the primary, I was polling 9%. Hubert Humphrey, Skip Humphrey was at 46%, and Mayor or former Senator Norm Coleman was at about 33%. Coleman never changed through the whole election from his polling. He was always within the margin of error. Humphrey dropped from 46 to 28. I went up to 37 because also they predicted only a 50% voter turnout because it was a non-presidential. It turned out they were wrong. 60% came out. I was polling 27% the day before the election. They didn't count on that 10%. I won with 37%. That is the key. The key is to hit the 50% of people in this country that do not vote. You must motivate them to come out, give them a reason to do it. I did it in Minnesota. They told me not to go to college campuses. They told me young people didn't vote. I told them they've never had Jesse the Body before. Send me to every campus you got in this state, and I did. They were sold out to the rafters. And let me brag for a moment and state the headlines in the Minneapolis paper after I won. Ventura wins. Sub-headline, throngs of young voters provide the margin. So I got to the young people, and they put me over the top.
So interesting that you should say that, because we did polling when we started this endeavor. We polled people who signed up to volunteer their time. So these are people committed enough to do more than just give us an email address. And what we found, the plan, for reasons you'll see shortly when I explain it, the plan brought people almost evenly from the left and the right, would-be Trump supporters and would-be Biden supporters. But the thing that was most heartening about it was that a quarter of the people who signed up to volunteer with us were not going to vote for anybody until they ran into Unity 2020. These were disaffected voters who are showing up in large numbers, and that pattern has continued. We have more recent data from people who have watched our campfires and participated in our data collection effort. So I think one thing that is clearly true is that party loyalists are having a hard time figuring out how to dismiss Unity 2020 because it doesn't trigger any of the things that they usually use to silence efforts that are outside of the duopoly. In other words, they usually tell you, well, maybe that's a good idea, but you can't do it this year because this year is too important and you'll spoil the election. But we don't spoil the election. We've designed the plan specifically to avoid any possibility of that, and it seems to work. But it is also true that the parties are in no position to lecture us on our moral obligations if we're bringing people back into civic life who were so fed up that they weren't planning to vote. That's something we should all desire, and the fact that the parties aren't interested in it is very telling.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Like I said, they count. Minnesota and Maine usually lead the nation in voter turnout. We're battling Maine. Ironically, when I was governor, the only other independent governor was Angus King from Maine. So the two states that have the highest voter per capita turnout also were the two states that elected independent governors back in 1998. I got all the press, but Angus actually preceded me by 4 years. He was in his second 4-year term when I was entering my first 4-year term, but it just showed you'll get the biggest voter turnout if you have a third choice, some legitimate third choice that people can go to. Because like I said, in Minnesota, they projected a 50% voter turnout. It turned out to be 60. I was polling 27%. In a three-way race, I won with 37. So it was that 10% that they did not count on that showed up at the polls. You know when we knew we were going to win it? We have also same-day registration here, which makes it great. We found out the morning of the election at the University of Minnesota, the lines were around the block to vote. And that's that morning when we said, by God, we're going to win this thing. Because there were more, and they also stated more people were lining up to register than were lining up to vote. So I knew they're not registering to vote for a Democrat or Republican newly. They're registering because someone else has entered the game. And I happen to be the fortunate one who did that.
Yes, you can tell that the parties aren't really interested in governing because they aren't really interested in how many people are involved in the process. They're only interested in whether or not they can freeze out other efforts and whether or not they can win power that they can then sell to the highest bidder. So an awful lot of us have recognized that that process can't possibly work in the nation's interest.
The big thing for me is this about them. If you watch the Democrats and Republicans, both of them, They put their party first. The party comes before the country. Look at the examples that you have shown right now with Mitch McConnell, just blocking anything they can do to President Trump. So Trump has McConnell in his back pocket. They can't do a thing to him. He can run amok out there, do anything he basically wants, and as long as the Senate won't convict him of anything, he's free to do it. And that's the big problem. They put their party first. Then who comes second? Their big donors, the big corporations, the people that give them the big money. They're the second on the chain. Who's third on the list? Well, third is probably their own personal viewpoint may come in at that point, number three. And where do the people stand? I would give us fourth, but I may be wrong. Something could sneak in and we could actually be fifth. I haven't figured out fourth fully yet, but we're no better than fourth right now. Again, it's party first, big time money donors second, personal opinion third.
Yeah, they laugh at us behind our backs. We are basically patsies in their influence peddling operation. And, this has actually been established now. It's been scientifically studied. And the interests of the public have almost no influence on policy at this point. And it's precisely because the parties have a business model that does not involve actually governing. It's also, incidentally, tearing the country apart because they're selling us symbolism and they're selling us the demonization of other Americans rather than actually doing their job. So I'm sure we're in almost complete agreement about that, if not complete agreement. But let me tell you what is making Unity 2020 difficult for the parties to dismiss is the structure. The structure involves not electing somebody who is outside of the parties, but drafting a team of two people, one from the left and one from the right, under an agreement that they will govern by consensus. Somebody has to be the top of the ticket, obviously. That person would be chosen by coin flip, and after 4 years, the positions would reverse, and the president would run as vice president, and this could go on until one party had been president twice, at which point they'd have to be replaced by someone new, and the system could go on indefinitely. So that structure, A, reduces the chance of spoiling the election to almost zero. We also have a fail-safe, which is if the ticket cannot win at the point that the election is approaching, we pull the plug on it and the election reverts to its prior state. But it also seems to assure people, as we hoped it would, that when decisions are made at the level of the chief executive, that their values and interests will be represented in the room, and that what is done will be that which is in the public's interest rather than special interests.
And that sounds wonderful. I guess I'd piggyback on that. My best answer would be to also include the Constitution of the United States of America. Because it seems to me today, the two parties, that it's a worthless document that is there only in name only. Nobody follows it. Nobody goes by the rules of it. I mean, how many wars are we involved in now? And yet we've never declared a war since World War II. Now, it bothers me tremendously today because I'm a Vietnam veteran, but technically I'm a war criminal. I served my country, but I'm a war criminal. Why? Because the United States never did actually declare war in Vietnam, so therefore the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to any of us. We are all war criminals because our own government and politicians wouldn't declare the war. My position's simple. I'm very anti-war. And you'd have to convince me greatly that the United States is in dire trouble and has to defend itself. But on the flip side, if the Congress, I want the Congress to declare war so that then as a president, you can carry out that declaration. But when they don't declare war, then it isn't a war. And that's what we're involved in today. So I would add to you, the Constitution of the United States needs to be followed. It's not just a document there to look good. It's the law of the land. And it's about time we get elected officials that pay attention to the law of the land.
Well, I would certainly agree with you. I think the Constitution is a spectacular document. I must confess, I think there are elements of it that I think are out of date, and that's not a bad reflection on the founding fathers. They couldn't possibly have understood the world that document would have to function in. But at the moment, we don't even treat the spirit of it with any sort of reverence, which, your point about the executive declaring war by playing word games and calling things police actions and the like, that's obviously a violation of the spirit of the document. And yes, it is about time that we stop behaving that way.
It's beyond the spirit. The document says clearly, Congress shall declare war.
It does.
No spirit involved there. It's in black and white.
Well, I agree. This is what I'm saying, is we have violated the spirit of the document. And
didn't fight with you, that's all.
No, I appreciate it. And, I'm quite disturbed about the abandonment of the core principles there. In fact, you can make a strong argument that the NDAA of 2012 violated, or at least sets up the violation of every one of the rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights, except possibly your Third Amendment right. So anyway, I'm very disheartened that we have treated the document so badly.
And let me add this. There are things in the Constitution that should be changed. Now, I'll give you one right now. The Electoral College. Let's get rid of the Electoral College. It's an elitist system. It's totally outdated. The only reason it was in place was because at that time you didn't have communication and everyone had to ride on horseback to Washington. My answer to that is, when's the last time somebody went on horseback to Washington? And the point is, then you hear the argument, well, everyone will forget about the little states because they'll only care about the big states with the people. I got news for you. If I'm running for president and I've given the option to campaign in California or Montana, which one do you think I'm going to? I'm going to the one with all the electoral votes, not the one with 2 or 3. So that's a false argument when they say that the candidate won't pay attention to the little state. They're not going to anyway, any more than they have to. They're going to go where the masses are. And to me, how can you have an electoral system where somebody who gets the most votes loses? I mean, that doesn't happen for mayor, governor, senator, Congress, even dog catcher, if you vote on that. A guy or girl who gets the most votes wins, except the presidency. Now, that's utterly ridiculous, in my opinion.
Well, this is not going to be popular. And the fact is, what I think about this doesn't make any difference because I'm not running for office, right? This is just one man's opinion. But there are arguments both ways. The current instantiation of the Electoral College is an abomination. The fact is, it's been captured by the parties, and they use it as a mechanism to ensure that nothing that they don't like happens at the level of presidential politics. It's one more mechanism for ensuring that they remain in control. That said, the idea of a body that could prevent a catastrophe in the event that something happened strikes me as potentially positive, as long as it left the will of the public intact as it functioned. Now, I agree with you. There is a perverse incentive to visit big states and pay attention to them rather than states that are sparsely populated. So there's a lot to talk about with respect to what the Electoral College should be, and certainly there's no defense for what it is. But nonetheless, it's a complex issue.
I don't think so. I think it's very simple. He or she who gets the most votes deserves to win.
I believe that should generally be the case.
Anything else is bogus. Anything else is bogus. Look at, for all the years, the delegates didn't even have to vote the way their state wanted them to. Your state could vote for one candidate, but you as a delegate could go there and vote for a different candidate. What kind of nonsense was that? And they're just cleaning that up now in some states. It's still not that way in other states. So you've got an elitist group that choose it. So truthfully, when you vote for president, your vote don't count because he isn't elected by you. He or she isn't elected by you. They're elected by the Electoral College. So that may be the biggest reason we're talking about why people don't vote today, because they know their vote is meaningless.
Well, we agree that the current form of the Electoral College is a tremendous problem and an obstacle to democracy. I guess the question is, do we need a fail-safe or don't we? But anyway, maybe a conversation for a different time.
Another day.
Yep. All right. So what do you think about a power-sharing arrangement where right and left engage in patriotic decision-making on behalf of the public?
Well, I think it sounds good on paper, but I think getting it to actually work will be the true challenge of it. I mean, it might look good and people might talk it up great and say, "Oh yeah, we're all gonna sing Kumbaya by the fire now." But will that be the reality of the situation? Dealing with politicians? I don't think so.
Well, we're not talking about dealing with politicians. We're talking about dealing with people who have been chosen by the unity movement for their ability to honor that agreement. You're among them.
Did they choose the right person?
Well, they've chosen 6 people who can be composed into 9 tickets. We haven't yet had our vote, so we don't know what ticket it is that we are going to draft. But
you're a new experiment.
It is a new experiment.
And we got to see what happens when you throw the dirty pants in the washer.
Yep. So if you found yourself
clean, or do they come out still dirty?
Right. Yeah. I guess it depends how dirty they are. But I'm a fan of the idea that if the right people are chosen, and I believe 6 excellent people have been chosen by our membership, that this plan can work, because one of the components that is required of our candidates is that they be patriotic. Right? The other 2, they have to be capable and they have to be courageous. And I believe if you put 2 capable, courageous patriots together and you say, the nation needs you, that they will do the right thing, that those characteristics are sufficient to ensure it.
I hope you're right.
Excellent. All right. So if you found yourself in the White House, let's say as part of a partnership, and you needed...
Totally hypothetical now. I don't want to lose my job or my health care by them saying I'm running.
So you're dealing...
I want to out verbally right now. I do not want to lose at this time my health care or my job, which I would lose both if I run at this moment. So this is completely hypothetical.
It's a thought experiment. Nobody has been drafted.
Very good.
All right. So in this thought experiment, let's say you found yourself in the White House, elected through, I don't want to call it a third party because I don't think of Unity 2020 as a third party, but it is outside of the 2-party system. If you were to be elected as part of that structure and you were faced with a Congress that was composed of members of the duopoly, do you think you'd be able to work with them to get things done?
Well, I already did it.
Tell me.
You're talking to the only guy that you got on your list of 6 who's already did it. When I was elected in Minnesota, I was by myself. We had no independents. We did gain one. One Democrat got booted up north, a great guy, and I fought for him and got him a minority position. So they had to honor him as a minority representative. He was our only one halfway through. But getting back on track, when I got elected, I had a Democratic Senate and a Republican House, right? For the first 3 years, whoever I sided with generally prevailed because it was 2-1. For the first, let me say that again, the first 3 years. I can tell you exactly what will happen. Been there, done that. 3rd year is when the Democrats and Republicans jumped in bed together. They started singing Kumbaya by the fire together, reunited the state of Minnesota's Democratic and Republican parties to oppose who? Me, the common sense middle. Now they're in bed against me in my 3rd year. My job as governor is to submit the budget. I submitted the budget. They declined it. They came back with their own budget, not the governor's budget, their budget. It was fiscally irresponsible. I vetoed it. They sent it back a second. They overrode my veto, sent it back to me a second time. I vetoed it again, which was all that I could do. They overrode me a second time, and that budget went into effect. Well, they thought they were going to get me with that budget because I'd now have to operate under it. So that was one of the reasons, as well as multiple others, why I didn't seek re-election. I didn't want to operate on their budget because I knew it was fiscally irresponsible to do so. Lo and behold, I was right. What happened after I left office? They were banking on a strong economy. They were rolling the dice that was going to happen. Not good policy fiscally to gamble with the people's money. They failed. Minnesota had a $5 billion deficit they had to deal with. Why? Because the Democrats and Republicans teamed up and got political together to overrule the seated governor who brought forward a fiscally responsible budget, but they didn't want none of that. They were going to exercise their power. So see, I've been there and done that. I know exactly how it would work. If I were elected president, hypothetically, it would take me 3 years to unite the Democrats and Republicans back in bed together because the thing they fear most is a third entity. They fear that more than anything else they talk about. They don't want a third entity in the game. And when that entity comes into the game, rest assured within 4 years, the Dems and Repubs will be back in total unity. You'll see how wonderful they get along. So that is how, in one way, you save the nation.
Well, I mean, that's not a very hopeful story at some level because the Democrats and Republicans uniting to thwart the governor is a...
Wait, you want the truth, don't you?
I sure do.
There it is. That's the truth.
So...
That's what you're going to deal with.
Well, if I can push back a little bit, they do have a third entity at the moment. Donald Trump was not exactly a Republican, and he seems to have decapitated the Republican Party and taken it over successfully. So while you might have imagined that the Democrats and Republicans would have conspired against him, that's not what we saw. We saw something else. So I'm not sure that the pattern you suggest, which I do believe is real and likely, is the only pattern. We can see other phenomena.
I disagree with you because the moment Donald Trump came to visit me after I won. Donald Trump also used my playbook to get elected. But the moment Donald Trump declared he was a Republican, that ended any likeness to me. And he became a Republican. When he entered the Republican primary, he was not a third entity then. He was a Republican. Just like Bernie Sanders. Bernie likes to tell everybody he's an independent, and yet I find Bernie is nothing more than a Democrat. Because I approached Bernie Sanders when he was in 2016, and I was going to break my cardinal rule. I actually thought about endorsing him. I went down and called his people, went down. He wouldn't give me the time of day. When he finally did, he gave me 30 seconds in a hallway. And I asked him one question. I said, Senator Sanders, if you lose to Secretary Clinton, will you support a party movement or will you yourself run as a third candidate? He looked at me and says, no, I will 100% support Secretary Clinton. I walked out of the building knowing he's nothing but a Democrat. He's just masking as an independent. He isn't truly an independent. He's a Democrat. And so getting back on touch, Trump became a Republican when he ran for that office. You're not going to tell me that they're a third entity when they join a party and run under that party's label. For us, no, they are now part of the Republican Party and they are part of the Democratic Party. They are not independents. Neither was Donald Trump. The only thing he did different, instead of going to fundraisers, he did what I did. He went to rallies. Where do you think he got that idea from? I went to rallies on college campuses, all Minnesota, and all that. Trump watched, and he saw how it worked. While Hillary was there collecting big money, Donald Trump was out meeting the people like Jesse Ventura did.
Well, I see a big difference between Sanders and Trump. I think there were reflections of the same frustration, and therefore, they told us something about the state of the electorate in 2016. But effectively, Trump muscled in on the Republicans' action, and Sanders was an independent, but he has played party loyalist, which I must say is where he lost me. I was a supporter in 2016 of Sanders, and at the point he endorsed Clinton, I had the sense that this is now a dead end. And I wish I didn't have to say that, because as much as I disagree with Sanders about policy, I greatly respect his ability to exist as an independent inside the duopoly. And frankly, I think whatever it is that goes on inside the Democratic Party reflects a level of control that the people outside need to understand. It has controlled its primaries so that entities that believe something different, Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, are all shut down early in favor of these sort of DNC standard bearers, and the nation won't survive our continuing down that path.
Well, I'm not going to make excuses for Democrats and how they run their operation, or the Republicans who run theirs. But to me, unless you're running with an I in front of your name as an independent, you belong to those two parties. And all the people that Bernie and Trump and all them ran with the party designation by their names. So essentially, they need those parties to become their candidates. And so, you and I may beg to differ on that a little bit, but to me, an independent is an independent through. You don't join one party because it's politically advantageous for you at the moment. And then, and which is what Trump, in my opinion, when he joined the Republicans, he wasn't me anymore. He wasn't trying to do what I wanted to do. And Bernie the same way. Bernie's a Democrat. He might be an independent and have that by his name, but the reality is he's a Democrat.
Well, so I think maybe this is the very important thing that we have to discuss with each other then, because your point about independent, I resonate with, but I don't think it goes far enough, because there are too many ways to be independent, and that in effect, the unity movement is about bringing all of those who have recognized that we have a critical problem in our electoral system together, on the basis that the thing that should unite all of us is the well-being of the nation and the interests of citizens. And so the unity movement is really not about being independent from the parties. It is about joining together to overthrow them. And I see that as the only path forward.
And you may be right. I don't necessarily sit and say that my way is any better than any other. All I'll say is good luck.
Well,
because you're first of all, you're going to get infiltrated badly by the two parties. They're going to send opposites to you, and they're going to disrupt things, and they're going to make it as horrible as they possibly can for all of you in that situation. Because remember, all is fair in love, war, and politics. They're the dirtiest players out there. And it's the dirtiest business out there. And when you're done being involved in the business, you know what you feel like? You need a good hot shower. Being part of what happened, which I've done for 8 years. I've been elected mayor. I beat both parties when I was elected mayor of Brooklyn Park. It was a nonpartisan election. The two leaders of the state of Minnesota co-signed a letter and sent it to every citizen in Brooklyn Park, calling me the most dangerous man in the city. Well, I won 67% to 33% against a 20-year incumbent, endorsed by both major political parties. So, if you want to bring the Dems and us together, if they're willing to do that, that's a wonderful thing. But I challenge you, I want to see the Dems and Repubs singing Kumbaya together, for the country, because I just don't see them going that direction.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that we unify the Democrats and Republicans. I think those two parties are beyond redemption. I want to unify the people who understand that everybody who understands that and believes in the nation has an interest in joining together in order to break their stranglehold on power. That's the point. So that's what unity is about. It's the unity of the people outside the duopoly and those inside who have ears to hear that there is a problem, right? Those people will all very naturally want to do whatever is necessary to eliminate that corrupt duopoly power structure because it works against the interests of the people and it works against the long-term interests of the nation.
Yep. And you're going to need to look at this as probably at least minimum of a 10-year thing this to happen. Because I don't believe it, and I don't see it happening fully integrated. It'll take at least 10 years to break the stranglehold.
To fully break it, it might. There's a reason that we're starting with the office of president, because I believe the office of president has the greatest power, the bully pulpit, as it were.
It's like when the mafia leader said, if you're going to kill John Kennedy, you cut off the head of the dog, not the tail.
So
as you can tell, I'm a Kennedy aficionado. I've studied his murder for most of my adult life. I find it extremely interesting reading.
It's a fascinating event, and we were trying to explain the complexity of it to our children at dinner the other day because whatever it is that happened haunts the nation to this day. It's almost like things stopped making sense in 1963, and they have never gone back to making sense.
Sir, you are, in my opinion, exactly correct. You and I sit together on that. We have not been the same country since the coup d'etat took place in '63. And you notice I called it a coup d'etat.
I did notice that. So you mentioned that one of the things the unity movement should expect is infiltration. And I don't think it's just infiltration. We, at the very initial conversations that we had as we formed the movement, we talked about the fact that we knew that was coming. And we also knew that other weapons would be brought to bear against us. This week, we've seen this happen in spectacular form where Twitter suspended our official Twitter account, suspended the account of volunteers that are part of our organization. And maybe the most interesting thing is they triggered or installed some mechanism that when you attempt to tweet a link to our website, this is not Twitter, this is off-site where we distribute information about our movement. If you attempt to tweet it, it will not allow the tweet to go out. It gives you a warning that the content is understood to be potentially harmful. So this strikes me as an absolutely egregious abuse of power on Twitter's part, and it basically indicates that they are aware of the threat that a unity movement that holds no truck with these parties poses to the influence that they unfairly have over government.
Well, take that as a badge of honor. Take that, you're getting their attention. I would love to add to this, you're falling into the same thing. Do you remember my show, Conspiracy Theory?
I have to tell you, I don't think I saw it.
Okay, that's fine. But I did a show called Conspiracy on TV where we covered a lot of the conspiracies, and we were going to do it telling both sides. But a lot of them deal with the government, and when the government's involved, they're not going to cooperate. So we ended up just telling the conspiracy side, and then we allow the people to decide on their own. Well, what I'm getting back to is you're going to get pushback because, you cannot get my conspiracy theory shows anywhere on the internet today. They wipe them clean. What's his name? The disc jockey in Chicago. I forget his name off the top of my head. Big disc jockey there. He had all the shows. He came home from work one day, went to put one in, they were wiped off his computer. And so the government, you cannot get my conspiracy theory shows anymore to watch and to show the things that I showed, the thing up in Alaska. and all the, well, I showed the internment camps, and I got read off on the floor of Congress, and they tried to turn over to the Anti-Defamation League, because I made the comparison and showed a photo of the ones in Germany to the ones we're building, and they looked identical. The Defamation League never even contacted me. I think they looked at the pictures and said, he's right, So bear in mind, they'll come after you with guns. They've already come after you. You can't get my shows that I did. And a lot of them showed some pretty, I got read off on the floor of Congress by Senator Cohn.
Well, my hope is, and I think this is already beginning to happen, is that, we know they will come after us. And we know that based on the fact that honorable governance would completely restructure who the winners and losers are, that all of the current winners are liable to oppose it. So basically, we are expecting a huge amount of power to be arrayed against us as we show signs of having the potential to actually change things. But as that power comes after us, it reveals the importance of this. In other words, it's flak over the target. And to the extent that people are paying attention and they notice that we are facing these things, they will come to understand why it is that the movement has to exist and why they should join it. So we can't avoid it. I think we just have to lean into the fact that Goliath's ire is an indication that this must be done.
And look at it this way. The more they come after you is they fear you. So if they're ignoring you, you're not having an impact. So if they're focusing on you, then clearly you're having an impact. Look at it from that perspective too.
Yes, I don't think they're afraid of our winning yet. I believe they should be more afraid of it. But I believe that they are angered over the fact that we say in very plain terms that they are an influence peddling racket. And much of their power derives from the fact that we speak about them as if they're actually interested in governance. And the parties are clearly not interested in governance. They're interested in capturing power and selling it to the highest bidder. And frankly, anybody who's paying attention can see that. So if we say it out loud, it frustrates them because it reveals what they're up to. It's, we're pulling back the curtain. At some point, they will recognize that the frustration and anger that they have created in people is going to bite them, and it's going to usher them out of power, hopefully soon enough to save the nation.
Just make sure when you pull back the curtain, there's an audience there to see it.
All right. Well, that's an excellent concept. I like it. Can you put any flesh on that, Bones? How do you do that?
Do what? No, I'm sorry.
I liked your advice. When you pull back the curtain.
What I mean is this: getting I'll be blowing the American people off their ass enough to pay attention. Again, you got 50% of Americans that don't vote, and I sit in my head going, how can you not vote when the government takes half your money? You go to work 40 hours a week. The government takes out half of me when you do that. Shouldn't you pay attention to who's taking your livelihood and your money? And yet you got American people that don't care. They just live lives, don't bother me. As long as it's smooth, as long as my life isn't interrupted, it's all okay. But see, now their lives have been interrupted. They actually are being asked to wear masks. And we can't even get people to do that. We can't even get American people to guard their fellow Americans and wear a freaking mask. And I use my mother as an example. My mom spent her entire adult life wearing a mask. She was head nurse surgery at North Memorial Hospital in Minnesota. She was in surgery all week. You wear a mask in there. These people that talk about, masks do anything, I challenge them then the next time you have surgery, tell the doctors and nurses they don't have to wear masks at the surgery. Germs are okay. You don't have a worry about them. See, we can't even get people with their own lives on the line to wear something as simplistic as a mask. I mean, did you see last night they booed when they announced at the Trump thing that masks are required? The crowd erupted in boos. That's who you're dealing with here now. You're dealing with a public I don't know, maybe you're giving them more credit for intelligence than me. Maybe that's the problem. You believe they have more intelligence than what I'm dumbfounded over the fact that we don't even have the self-discipline. That shows me nobody's been in the military, because if you've been in the military, you know what discipline is. And you know that when you're in a situation where you wear a mask to protect your fellow citizens, and you're so selfish that you won't wear one, and yet that's what we have in America. They told us by December, 70,000 people like more are going to die because we won't wear a mask. I'm only saying that to say to you, good luck motivating these people.
Well, I appreciate that. What I would hope is that people recognize, especially people who were not planning to vote, that if they want to wield power, if they're not voting because they know that their vote doesn't matter, they can join us and they can matter right away, right? To the extent that they empower the unity movement, that is going to motivate the parties. It's going to frighten them. And so if they want to wield power in the system, the way to do it is to join forces against the parties that have made their vote irrelevant. And it seems straightforward to me. As for reaching them, well, apparently we are. 25% of our volunteers were not planning to vote. That tells us something important. But, it's also the case that we are, of course, up against I don't know how intentional it is. Presumably it's somewhat intentional. But, the media and the social media platforms are all effectively in line, if not because they've been erected into a bulwark to prevent people from wielding power, then because they enjoy having undue influence and they're looking to protect it.
Let me give you a quick story you'll love to hear. When I came out of office in 2003, this is a true story, I was the hottest commodity out there. I was the voice of the independent. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox got in war for me. MSNBC won. I signed a 3-year contract with them. I was going to be on 7 o'clock, right when Maddow is or whatever. I was going to be 5 nights a week. But the guy who hired me told me in a car, and he wouldn't say who, he said he got a phone call from Washington, 2 very high ups who wanted to know why they were giving me a national forum. After I'd been the independent governor of Minnesota, a national forum. Well, guess what? We set the whole show up. We're all ready to go on the air, and we get an interesting phone call. And here's the phone call. Is it Governor Ventura doesn't support the invasion of Iraq? This was right before the invasion of Iraq. My assistant said, oh, no, he's vehemently opposed to it. He's a Viet veteran. He says this is Vietnam all over again. On the other end, does New Jersey know, or does Connecticut know about this, meaning the big headquarters? We don't know. Here came the big question. Is there any chance he changed his mind? And my subordinate says, I don't think so. This is a military thing. He's on his military hat. The governor, he's opposed to the Iraq war. Guess what? My show wasn't allowed on the air. They had just hired Phil Donahue, the day guy. He was their highest rated show. He likewise opposed the war in Iraq. He was pulled from the air. Now, have you ever heard of a network pulling their top rated show and then not even letting me on? And it was all because they wanted no voices out there of opposition to the invasion of Iraq. So when you think that mainstream media out there isn't bought and sold by our government, there's your example right there. Opposing the Iraq war cost millions of dollars that I would have made with MSNBC as a show host on there. How much would I be making a year if I had gotten the opportunity to do that? But because I had a position of anti-war against the Iraq war, it cost me. And what happened? They didn't get on the air, but they paid me for the whole 3 years. And my contract said I couldn't do any news programs or anything on cable or satellite television because I was handcuffed and tape was put over my mouth because I honor contracts, and they paid me the whole 3 years and bought my silence.
Wow.
True story. True story.
Yep. I believe it. Sometimes they need to go to war for reasons that they know, and we don't. All right. So thank you very much for joining us. I have a couple of announcements.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your willingness to talk to us about the Unity movement. And voting begins soon if you're part of our movement and you signed up in time. We have...
Let me add something. Let me throw something out for everybody.
Sure.
Keep the Unity movement going. I'm behind you all the way. Go for it. You know, you'll get no opposition from me on it. And is better than the two choices we have now. I think your movement's outstanding, but I understand you got a long road to hoe, because taking on these parties is going to be a full-time job with overtime, and you ain't going to get paid for it. So good luck to you. Good luck to the Unity Party. If I can support you in any way, I will be happy to do so.
Well, I really appreciate that, Governor Ventura. Your support means a lot, and I also appreciate your message to our viewers. I think they do need that encouragement, and they need to encourage others, so people should spread the word. All right. Now to announcements. I'm going to ask you to sign up for our email list, especially with the platforms opposing our movement. You need to sign up for the email list in order to be able to receive information about what we're up to. So you can sign up for the email list at articlesofunity.org. You can also sign up at my Twitter account. I will keep people apprised of important developments at Bret Weinstein. There is a podcast, Unity Now, run by our volunteers, which is a continuation of themes of the Campfire. And we will see you next time on the next Campfire. Thanks, Governor Ventura. Be well.
Thank you. All right.